Oh.
All right, do we have any additions to the agenda tonight? Hearing none, I'll look for motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I make that motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll open up for public comments. If there's anyone who would like to discuss anything tonight that is not on the agenda, please come forward.
I'd like to talk about the parking ordinance, but they would do that.
Yeah, that's, yep. Anyone else that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one approach, we will close public comment. Not before we get to consent agenda, I'd like to just, introduce to audience, anyone listening, Tim Sullivan is the new city attorney for the city mayor, so welcome. Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. We'll go to the consent agenda. Anything on the consent agenda that, gives you a motion for the discussion? Real quick, maybe if you could, 523,
Okay.
Ash Avenue for the road closure. Is that a resident? Is that a business?
It's a request from a resident. They are having a graduation party, and so they just need to kind of temporarily block the alley for that. But I believe that the neighbors will have access, like going around to through the other entrance, and so it's just kind of their area, just a little area for a few hours. Yeah, it's kind of a security bank. Yeah. I think it's to the. Okay, now I have to. It's west of. Yeah, west of Security Bank. Or no, south of Security Bank. I'm sorry.
Anything else on the consent agenda?
All these resolutions are on there.
Oh, sorry, they're not listed, but yeah, they are in resolution form. Yep.
So all these road closures are on the consent agenda. So then I have one too. I think the County Road 22 on the Rising Community Festival has to be approved by the county as well. I think, because it's a county road.
Okay. So the Rising Community one. Okay. So I don't know if that one would be a separate application to the county.
I think it is.
Okay.
All right, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Motion second. Motion second, any further discussion? And real quick, I'd just like to acknowledge Brent, who's turned his resignation. So, he's hard work for the last year. That's certainly been great. I hate to see him leave. Sounds like it's a good opportunity for him, so I wish him the best. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That'll take us to 6A1. Maybe we'll start out with the study.
Yep. So, Mayor and Council, in front of you is in the packet is some information on the administrative study. David Drones and Associates was hired by the city to do a classification and compensation study. This is kind of where we're at the moment, which I'll provide an update on. Right now in front of you, we have the job descriptions of the current employees. At the last workshop, we kind of reviewed it a little bit, and then there was, I did get some feedback from council before this meeting as to some minor changes. So today we would be looking to approve those job descriptions And then we would also be looking for the council to re-review the market comparable communities that would be used for the studies and approve those as well and make any changes if necessary. And then the city council would also approve the benefits survey that would be sent out to the communities that we're going to be comparing ourselves to. One I did with the resignation of Brent in Public Works, we did have a meeting, a personnel meeting, where we we've discussed at council level the future of those positions, and I think it seems appropriate at this time to move Kyle's position as supervisor to that position before we hire a new person, because in March of next year, that's kind of where we're headed anyways, and so we're thinking that so the Personnel Committee agreed to that, and so right now it is reflected in the job descriptions that Kyle's position would be supervising the new position, and so I just wanted to let you know that that was probably the biggest change.
So that was adding in Public Worker 2.
Yep.
Reports to Public Worker 1.
Right.
Public Worker 1 reports to City Administrator.
Right. Yep. But then we still keep the Public Works Director position for when that transition comes in next year, so that we would shift again, kind of do that shift again at that time. Just to have that one ready.
And then there would be a separate Public Works Director.
In Kyle, once he receives his license for the wastewater treatment plant, would then move into that position, and then we would kind of discuss what that second position. It would still be underneath his position, but we would probably relabel it or relook at that. So, yeah. So tonight we're looking for the final review and approval of the job descriptions, and you can. Yeah, you can do it all in one. Yeah, that'd be fine. It hasn't. Oh, I haven't looked at it since we approved it. But we did. It hasn't gone up. I can get that to you after the meeting. This was approved. Yeah.
These are the cities, right, that they're gonna send?
Yes.
The ones listed.
Yep. And the ones that are highlighted are the ones that we approved. Yeah, I don't know what the Carver County one is and why that one's in there, but. Okay, so last year the City of Mayor initiated the review of language in relation to parking of vehicles, which includes recreational vehicles, specifically on the grass within yard areas. So the Planning Commission spearheaded this discussion. The zoning ordinance that was proposed to be amended was the Land Usage Chapter 152 Zoning, Section 152.003, which is the definitions section, and then Section 152.026 Driveway Parking Area and Hard Surface Improvements. So this not only included vehicles, but it also included recreational vehicles, and it the planning commission or the city kind of sought language that would clarify where these vehicles would be parked and how many. So if you look at the packet, there is quite a bit of definitions that were added, just to kind of clarify specifically like what an impervious surface was, what different lot areas covered, like the rear lot, front lot, side lot, through lot. It also defined like lot width, what a motor vehicle was, a lot, parking lot, parking pad, parking space. It just kind of clarified a lot of the definitions that were either not in there or just needed some cleaning up. And then it also kind of reviewed where these vehicles and how many there would be. So there's specific focus on like a side lot and a rear lot and the front lot, and how many vehicles are allowed in each area. I don't know if there's specific questions. I know we've gone over this quite a bit. I know that there has been some since the last review. I know some things have been taken out. It has been reviewed by the planning commission, and the two changes that they did take out was the length and width requirement for the parking pads in the side and front yards, and then another change was allowing recreational vehicles to be 36 feet instead of 30 feet. And then there was a typo that was adjusted in the final change that took out the 48-hour parking requirement in the front yard. And then there were just some minor changes that were suggested by the city attorney as well. So, are there any specific questions you have right now that staff could answer? I know that there may be some people in the audience as well that have some questions.
Well, our office reviewed it. We weren't involved in the planning commission stages of it. It's my understanding that the planning commission had a number of meetings on this, including a hearing on it. Some changes were made in that process. When we looked at it, it was, almost in its final version. Anytime you do substantial changes to the definitions of the zoning ordinance, you want to make sure that you kind of look at it closely, because those definitions carry throughout the entire zoning code. So just to make sure that there aren't any surprises as you go through that the best that you can. We were able to kind of simplify some of the definitions, working with the planner, to try to make sure that they were saying what we wanted them to say, and clarifying particularly, the number of vehicles or recreational equipment that could be parked in the various yards, because there's different standards for a front yard, a side yard, and the rear yard under the proposed ordinance before the council today. And as you know, the front yard is just a temporary setup that the council had looked at previously, whereas now there's more detail about how parking of the vehicles and recreational vehicles and equipment would happen on side yards and in rear yards. And because not all lots are created equal, we need to make sure that the zoning code gave some identifications towards how the lots would be measured out, or laid out with a corner lot or a through lot. With alleys in town, there's a number of lots that are a little bit different than just standard lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was December of last year, and then, December.
So if we make that motion, we can't make changes to this, right? I mean, it's just a pain, like we have to redraw
Well,
it.
yeah, we'd have to redo it, so we can talk through it now and start. Maybe start going page by page. Now, page one, any clarification needs on that? On page two.
So on page two, all the way down at the bottom, it's a definition, but is this stating that there is no, so area off the public streets right of way? Off the public street, which someone needs to be the parking space, automobile, it should look like this. Into the area off the public street right of way. That does not say anything about, I guess I'm wondering if there's anything in here that prohibits them from parking on the street with their vehicle.
No.
Did I? We have a different ordinance for that.
We allow street parking, it's a different one that covers how long it can be, vehicles can be out there.
And, okay, go ahead.
Page three.
Yeah.
Page three. The agriculture district. We have a district?
I think, so we have, we manage zoning for this part,
Okay.
even though right now it's township. So it was in our zoning jurisdiction, it kind of fell back onto the, the land kind of fell back to the county, but we're still a zoning district. So we covered that.
All right, page four, anything?
Number 4. All lots having direct driveway access on a major collector or arterial road shall provide turnaround facilities on the lot to eliminate vehicles backing into said road. And my question is that feasible? How are they gonna have turnarounds unless you consider backing into your driveway and being able to turn around? I don't know, is that feasible? I don't know, I live in a great big lot where we can turn semi around in there, so.
I know that, I know what this is talking about, and what I've seen on other major roads with residential homes, it's almost like it's part of the driveway, it's like they build a parking pad, get into the driveway, so you can kind of back up into that, and then go straight out onto the street.
Instead of having to back up into the street.
Correct. But I've seen some that have done that.
The major collector or arterial roads are, say that one comes down to anything but a residential.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where we would have, access, Blue Jay, Highway 25 has some. We have Fieldstone Parkway that I would consider in that category of road, but there's no, driveway access onto that. Hidden Creek and Coldwater have roads that kind of function as collectors, but I don't think we treat them that way. So yeah, I think really it's probably Blue Jay, Highway 25, County Road 30. I'm trying to think if we have anything that goes directly on County Road 30. So probably down to Blue Jay and Highway 25 at this point. But so it is. I think it is a valid thing. The question I would have is: this something that you're trying to require somebody that has that situation now to do something different, or is this, as something new would be established, that this requirement would apply to them? If somebody was to come along Blue Jay and they wanted to build a new garage and redo their driveway, at that point, my impression of this is that would trigger this requirement on them. In the meantime, however it is the way it is.
So as long as there's no improvements, then they can be grandfathered in.
that's the way I would see it, and your
They'd have
city
a, they'd
attorney
have
would
at
have.
least a good argument of an existing nonconformity.
Yep.
But like you said, if they just continue the use, or there's an improvement, or there's the things that trigger or cancel off a permissible existing nonconformity, or any new permits would need to, comply with the new performance standards under the zoning code.
So are we considering none of our city streets major collectors?
I think, the one that comes to mind is Fieldstone Parkway. That's a city street. I'd consider that a major collector, or a collector. That's the only one, I think, that is built and functions in that manner.
But this is reducing the budget, so basically we're just looking at 25.
Yep.
What's Arterial Road?
Arterial it would probably be a highway. Yeah, that might be. I think we have them listed in our comp plan, how we categorize each one of those.
For all these additions, I just feel like I'm missing some of the history behind some of the conversations. Like, I'm slightly confused about the public hearings, and then there was a joint meeting and just having those conversations. So I feel like there was changes made after the public hearing coming from, and then we're here. So can someone explain to me, like, the whole process of, like, because John made it sound like you've been talking about, planning has been talking about this, and I know you
Mhm.
guys here,
Right.
about this for a long time, and then there was a public hearing, and then there was a meeting that unfortunately I missed, and then this got brought back to planning commission
Mhm.
with more changes. So how does, like, public hearing
So my
work?
understanding is that they brought initial template to the planning commission to hold a public hearing to get public comment. And so that was kind of the time where the public was able to come in and make comments, and where changes from public input could be made.
That was just me, I'm trying to understand how this public hearing process works.
Yeah, and so I think then at the next meeting, they took the public comment, or John made those changes that the public had commented on, and so that kind of went back to the planning commission, but then it's up to the planning commission to kind of get to the point where they recommend it to council. And so I think that initial public hearing was to get the public input, which is mandatory for zoning ordinance changes.
Yeah, I
And then
apologize that I didn't know the whole.
No, it's been we've been working on this for a long time, so, yeah, so I think it's just kind of has gone through the steps, like it initially was the public hearing, and then the changes were made, and then I think there was just more discussion at the planning commission. And then I think they had wanted the joint council planning commission meeting just to seek a little bit more clarification, and
Yeah, so just because the public hearing was held doesn't mean that planning or even us can't keep making some changes.
Right, that's,
Based on public comment, we saw what
Right,
happened after
exactly.
the hearing, the public, made comments and we took some things out and.
I was just trying to get clarification in my head how it played out, because I just, like, I don't remember seeing this, what we were just talking about, that term, like, why was that added?
I think a lot of it came from professional, advice, John, and the attorney had some input, I don't know, neutral, but you just reviewed it.
Just reviewed the language.
This is the plan.
I just,
Anything more on page 4? On page 5?
Additional clarification in number 2. What does that mean? Each residential dwelling unit shall have 2 off-street parking spaces. So if someone wants to come and put in, park something there, they have to build 2, is that what that means? Or what am I misreading about that?
It's talking about driveways. You were correct, that it's talking about driveways. So the performance standards that we're going under right now is going through essentially driveways, parking areas. The new addition is starting at the bottom of page 5 is parking pads. So that's like a non-driveway parking space. So as far as that's already in there. So those two changes that you're looking at right there, where the only additions are the underlines. So the only addition is putting in the number 10 and then spelling out 20. Those are the only two amendments to the current language of the code. Otherwise, that performance standard is already in place.
All right, so then I have a question about number 7.
Yeah, no.
Did we decide that 5 was the number? Because I don't remember that.
Well, I think planning commission did, and planning commission's bringing it here for us to decide, but that's what planning commission approved and agreed on.
Wasn't it like if you had your snowmobile on your trailer, that's considered one, and if you had your snowmobile off your trailer and a trailer, that's another two?
Mhm.
5 vehicles outside. 5 vehicles can be parked outside of the structure.
So you got 5 cars in your parking, in your driveway.
You can have 7 if you have a 2-car garage.
Yeah, 4 in garage,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have 5 on the driveway.
I just want to know.
I think lower than,
Especially for families that have 3, 4 kids.
that seems lower than that.
That are driving.
They will be.
You have a fish house out there or a boat, and then, 15 lower than 5.
You know, there's always one being stored that you
I'm
can.
thinking of my driveway, and I'm like, I can't get 5 cars on there, because then I'm obstructing the sidewalk, and that's right away.
Standard
So I
driveway.
can't put 5 on.
Like you have a 5 path,
Yeah, I could do 4.
you know, you have a 5 path, and put 2 cars on a 5 path. And then you could have your driveway. 15 lower.
Driving around though, I
Yeah,
haven't
there's
seen
street parking,
any more
that's
than
true.
that.
There's street parking.
I'm fine with 5.
I'm fine with too many more than that driving around town on a lot, over 5, and then 2 in the garage.
I don't know what the garage, but there's a lot of cars on the driveway.
Then I was
That's what
I
we're
mean, I
doing
don't-
before.
I don't really care as long as they're not junkers, you know?
It just seems more to me, but
But does-
maybe that seems appropriate. Maybe 5 is.
I haven't heard any feedback on the 5, so.
No,
If you have a lot of drivers, you can't have a lot of choice. But it does start adding up, and my neighbor has 4 cars in his driveway, and a boat, and a, not necessarily, other things.
I guess probably not considered a homeowner.
Anything further, there is a, I think it's a typo down at the very bottom, the DD, where it says, second study, a minimum of 5 feet from the property, I think it should say from the property line.
On page 5?
Page 5, very bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so you're on page 6, yeah, that's on page 6.
Oh, that's not on page 5.
There's a John's memo that it has the ordinance changes, and then there's also the ordinance
Oh,
a few pages later.
which one are we looking at? I looked at the first one, it's probably not, it's probably, I'm looking at the first one.
Oh, I'm looking at the ordinance.
Okay, so these.
So page 50.
Minimum of 5 feet, 5 feet front of property line. Ah, that's good, Josh. Oh, you give up on reading the word.
On that
For that.
on that same one, the drainage and utility, easement not having things in there, is there, I know what other things, other times, as long as they
Well, I think we have it, I think John has it somewhere in there that, I thought there was an agreement. I mean, right now, we're kind of we're allowing it if you get permission from your neighbor. It's like a signed document. Yeah, it's, 'cause usually that 5 foot. Right now we allow fences, but we do allow, we usually have the city engineer review it. And then we also,
So later on.
and the city planner reviews it as well, and,
Well, somewhere in here it says that if it's in the easement,
yeah, it's
it
subject.
has to be approved and it's subject to removal if something needs to be done. So it says something different in the different section.
Yeah, I think it's on.
I can't remember where it is, but I know I read it.
Up a little above, we have kind of some similar language, and that's why we're asking. So if you look at 8C,
Before that,
yep, up above it, 8C, the last sentence, that kind of talks about some watershed that
Yeah, yeah.
language.
yeah, this one does cover it, this is the part that talks about it in the 14 year too.
What does that cover it for everything? We need a language.
Yeah, I think it covers.
So this isn't new, and the other one that you're talking about is new, so you come in. This was already in our ordinance, the C, right?
Right, and that's how we've been
So
processing
and
it.
so this one does kind of contradict it, doesn't it? DD.
And if I could, I guess the question I have is, what approval is needed to do that? You know, this, what you're looking at right now talks about if it is in there, who's responsible and, basically whenever you're told to get it out of there, you need to, and who's gonna pay for it. But, the easements are a little trickier just from the standpoint of one is, we're gonna wanna make sure that drainage isn't affected. Some of the easements we have infrastructure in, which makes it a little bit more concerning if we're putting a structure in. The fence is one thing, the argument that's always been with the fence is it gets a little tougher because you can make so much of the yard unusable if we don't have some flexibility on the fences, even though all the kind of the same responsibilities hold true. And then my only other comment is, part of going into the easement and, as it ties to the neighbor is now you're, on most city lots, you have 5 feet on both sides of that property line. If you're going into that 5-foot easement, you're within 5 feet of the property line, and now if you have your motor home or whatever parked there, you start getting pretty close to your neighbor. And just the only other thing I'd say to consider is you get the permission of the neighbor you have now. The new neighbor moves in and they're not as keen on that. Are they just stuck with that at that point, or is the city going to now get involved in that and have to try to police that? Just something to think about.
I think it's contradicting itself. C says, yep, you can do it in the easement, and DD says, no, you can't.
I think that, on the one hand, I don't know that they're necessarily contradictory, but I do exactly see what you're saying. But to the other point is that there is a 5-foot setback for parking pads. So when you look at what's being added in here, so this provision was already in, so looking under C, so 8C, they added in the off-street parking area, and then they specified or driveway. Before it was just talking about driveways because we didn't have a provision talking about parking pads or off-street parking areas. So whether you want to clarify it would make sense, but in most cases it wouldn't matter because there is a performance standard that you can't be in that 5-foot setback, and that 5-foot setback is, correct me if I'm wrong, going to be most of the drainage and utility easements, is the 5 feet on both sides of the property lines.
Yep, unless, and where that's different is where we have infrastructure. If we have storm sewer running down those property lines, then usually it's 10 feet on both sides of the lot.
A strange corner lot or something
Yep.
where there's different
Yep.
drainage, whereas, before, it allowed something to be constructed in that easement so long as there was an agreement about what was gonna happen. As far as whether you wanna address that in the new language, there's always, it says that it shall not be located in a drainage and utility easement, there's always the variance process. Right.
You know, so we'll leave them both parked in just the way they're written. Alright.
All right, next page, I got page 6. I have page 6.
Is that where you are, Mike? Recreational vehicles and equipment then? That E, or which E? Little E or big E?
I'm on little E from parking pad.
So parking pad shows that,
D, E.
so 1D we just looked at, so now you're looking at 1E in cases where improved or semi-approved?
Yes, that's the top of my page 6.
Okay.
Okay. Now I know where we are.
Just to clarify for the record, both of these documents that we're looking at are in the packet.
They are,
There's a
yeah.
memo, so the pagination is slightly different, but they both have the same proposed ordinance, so we're looking at the same thing for the people in the crowd.
Do you wanna follow Maggie where we have, where is that? Yeah, that's where I am, right there. All right, anything on that page?
I just have one question. Out in the front yard for E, there's a maximum of 1 operator license for vehicles and recreation vehicles that are allowed only on an unimproved surface parking pad in the front yard for a period not to exceed 1 week at a time for up to 5 weeks within a calendar year. I'm fine with that, but how do you monitor that?
Right.
Like how it,
I think he did that for, like, car sales.
right, but I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, I mean,
how-
it is tough
How do
to,
you, yeah, like, how do you know,
right.
like, I'm just looking at how do you,
I think
I'm
usually,
okay with it, I'm not saying there's something wrong with that, it's just, how do you,
usually I think there's one case I can think of in another city where, people may do it longer. It's one of those, like, there was somebody who would do like a garage sale year round, and that's kind of when we notice those things, like when it's becoming, when people are like, well, they've kind of had it on there for over a week, and we kind of start monitoring when people notice. That's kind of,
anything with time, how does it, how do you monitor?
yeah, and it's kind of just, when that happens, I think it's kind of educating people, like, just so you know, 'cause I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, but, if they do go over, if somebody does notice, is my neighbor able to be having their car in the yard for a month? And we can say, well, this is a good education opportunity to say you are allowed to do this, but we do have some restrictions. And but yeah, we don't require anybody to come up here and register their cars for sale. So
What is unimproved parking?
unimproved is, we have a definition. It's more like a gravel.
Grass also.
Oh.
Right.
But it can't be, so your lawn can't be more than 200 square feet, the front yard.
Yes. Oh, wait, where? Oh, up here.
Yeah, but what's parking on grass, I can plant separate grass on top of your grass if it was on a pad.
But unimproved surface is a surface
surface that is grass, compacted earth, or naturally occurring.
It seems like the parking pad piece of that should come out of there. That you're just saying that, I mean, really, on any unimproved surface, wherever you have that on your front yard, or, you know, I think that's what you're trying to get is, you don't want somebody's car sitting in the front yard for an extended period of time. It seems like, the parking pad piece of that would come out.
You need to add the word, unimproved, just like it is in the second line of it.
Or to say unimproved other than grass. Because now there's gravel, that makes sense to me, or if they're gonna put dirt down, we should have a size to it. Then that makes sense, but I'm getting hung up on the grass part.
What,
But you can't take up more than 200 square feet with whatever you parking out there.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading
Okay,
it.
all right, that's the intent of it then.
But it should say unimproved, not front yard parking pad, because they're not allowed.
So the part A there does specify that, improved or semi-improved parking pad is not allowed in the front yard, so that would limit it to unimproved. I agree with you that it's hard to define something as a pad when it's just where a car lays in the yard.
How about the vehicle area should not exceed 200 square feet? Would that make more sense?
Unimproved parking area.
Yeah, that
You're
makes
gonna
more
pad
sense. That makes more
area.
sense to me.
So the area shall not exceed 200 square feet. You want to do unimproved parking area or just parking area?
so you're saying a front yard parking area shall not exceed 200 square feet? Right.
So the vehicle parking area should not exceed 200 square feet.
Yeah, the vehicle parking area.
Directly the motor vehicle and recreational vehicle.
Okay. The front yard vehicle parking area. So we're gonna add the word vehicle and take out pad and add area. Good.
All right. And then 4C. Any grass or weeds growing around the motor vehicles and recreation vehicles that shall be regularly cut. We need to add, what about under?
Well, the pads have to be complete underneath the parking, or,
No, not
In
in
the front yard.
Front yard.
Because it's
But
just grass.
So if
but
they're selling
only,
They're selling something.
oh, if they're selling
I
something.
can't wear the top of the ground 18 inches, do we want grass under it 18 inches? Or,
It says subject to the non-exceed.
Yeah, it can't be there longer
so the
than,
weed ordinance, we know that now.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that page? Great. All right, last page, I give it. Mine starts
Oh,
on
sorry.
C3C, storage shall not occur in a required off-street parking stall. What does that mean? Can't put it. Storage shall not occur in a required off-street parking stall.
Driveway.
You can't store it in one of your two parking spots on your driveway.
A recreational vehicle or equipment.
Well, it's like your fish house, you put it in the summer,
52.
you know.
or storage, anything outside of what we, vehicles, recreation vehicles.
So that brings me to people who are still in their homes and they have pods. You know, they put their pods in their driveway, so now are we saying that they
Well, I
have
think
to
that's,
put that in their driveway, or what are we doing?
no, 'cause that's more temporary. Like, it's not like most people don't store those long-term, I would say, but.
And it wouldn't be covered by this because it's not a vehicle.
So should it say storage of non, or
Well, it's a very.
storage of other
Well, it says,
I think they.
it says recreational vehicles and equipment may be stored in the side or rear yard subject to the following standards. So I think that what it's saying is that is it referring to the front yard? That the front yard, it can't be stored on the front yard driveway?
So a required would be your driveway. You must have a driveway. So we can't store things in the driveway,
But you can park it in that,
but you could put it in your iPad or any of your, you have improvement.
I think what it was the two required off-side, or off-street parking, you know, your minimum is come up above, so say your third stall, if you have the right room, I think that's how it.
so you can put your fish house in front of your third stall.
I think that's how it is, as long as up above what's your minimum, 10 feet wide and 20, so you have to have two rows. I think that's how it is.
Yeah, because we require two. Right.
I think that's how it's
You can't
trying
store it
to.
in there, but you can store it in the third. Because I was gonna say, I know lots of people who store something in front of their third.
Yeah, I think that's how it's
So they still
trying
have
to be
two
worded.
off-street parking spots that are
Right.
the requirement. Thanks,
But-
Zach, would you like to run for city council?
No, I just want my trailer.
You want your trailer in your third stall? I know, that's okay.
But, I mean, coming
Yeah,
from
it
that,
does make sense that way. It
my
does make
question
sense
is,
that way.
how wide are driveways? Really, I haven't dug in mine, to be honest, but I'm saying 30 was the maximum.
I think it's 30.
The majority of them are 30, so if you
Mhm.
put, and most trailers are max 8.5, so they need a bigger size than that now. So technically you should be able to, but I can't tell you that I can just, so I can try to do that in my driveway. Well, I'm saying like myself, I got the trailer parked over as much as I can. I couldn't guarantee I could fit two cars side by side, and that's 16.
They don't have to be done.
No, I know,
One
but I'm
can be at the
saying,
top, one can be at the bottom.
I know, but I'm saying.
You don't care to be back into the guy
but-
on.
But I'm saying you're 20 feet, there's no way my vehicle is 20 feet, 20 feet. And I think my driveway is 40 feet.
Mhm.
So technically, I wouldn't be able to. I know, but if my driveway's 40 feet, you need 20, plus you can't have 5 feet up. Theoretically, I think. That makes sense what I'm trying to, like, no?
Because isn't it 30 feet at the curb?
It's 30
30
feet
feet.
at the property line,
At the, yeah.
so it widens out.
Right,
Right.
it's even narrower if the road's either
Like
that or
So,
narrower at the street.
There's no way I could do two cars right there. So even if people with three stalls aren't gonna be able to get two cars on the trailer. Well, I'm just saying is how they do the driveway, you're not gonna.
Depends on when people have the driveway, because not all the driveways are like that, some of those three-stall driveways, three stalls the whole way down.
Yeah, but even with that, I'm three stalls all the way across, there's no way I got 20 feet.
Then what do you do with the people in the old part of town that have no driveway? They park alongside their garage.
It just has to be an improved surface. They can park alongside their garage, correct? It just has to be an improved surface. They can't park it on the grass next to their garage.
That only works for. So now, you're gonna make those people put in asphalt where they could park it for 40 years?
Not necessarily, it can be,
Well, it was,
There's
that,
nothing in there in that document that says anybody's grandfathered in.
well, that's
There's nothing in
the,
writing
but that's
anywhere
not,
in
that
there.
hasn't changed though. It's always been required to have that surface. That's not changing. That part isn't changing. It's always been required to have a parking pad that's improved. Yeah, we've never I mean, like, from what I've understood, we've never allowed gravel. It's always been, well, whenever this ordinance came into effect, which a lot of these are probably, I don't know, 20 or 25 years old, a lot of them were grandfathered in a lot of the old properties were grandfathered in, but when, I mean, this is saying, which has probably been in effect for a while now, has always said that you needed to have an improved surface.
Where does it say in that document that the older homes are grandfathered in?
Well, when you,
But that wasn't changed, is what she's saying. It's always
I mean, this
said-
has been this way for a really long time. I don't know how long it's been, but a lot of these have been in for years. But yeah, I mean, like, the old, I mean, it does get tricky, like when, I mean, usually when you make an improvement to your property is when the new ordinance comes into effect.
So if I have to re-roof my house and pull a permit, now I have to asphalt my driveway?
Well, I mean, I've talked to John, the city planner about it, and he would say his interpretation would be yes. But I don't know, I mean, we haven't enforced it that way, but it's just, like, at some point, my understanding is, you know, these older properties, when more new improvements are made, they do go back, they have to follow the new ordinance then.
What's the older ones don't have the percentage available?
Well, I think that there are different percentages, because I've had John review some of the older parts of town, and there are some percentage differences, because their properties are structured differently, but.
I don't know if I'm just saying for those that do have smaller houses.
Yeah, I mean, it does, and I don't know, like, it's so different, because I know a lot of these newer neighborhoods have development agreements where they have different lot coverages, and so it's very circumstantial.
The older part of town that should be left alone. I understand the new developments, yeah, they got a lot more square footage and everything, they can, you know, they have room for all this extra stuff, but the old part of town, there's a lot of people that don't have that kind of room on their property.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, it does, I mean, it is tough to,
So that should be addressed in here also, I mean, you're gonna have two standards, one for the old part of town, one for the new part of town, new development.
But I think what it would be my opinion, there's only one standard, and what you're describing is if you've got a situation where you want to put a pad next to your garage, or, so start with you want to put a pad next to your garage, and you're on one of these smaller lots in town, what would happen is you're not going to meet the requirements, you'd have to come to the city and ask for a variance to do what you're doing, and you'd have to consider, you know, the varying reasons. But the standard wouldn't change.
Most of the older part of town, they already got a parking spot alongside their garage,
Mm-hmm.
just gravel.
Yep.
And they got no apron or very short apron out of their garage into the alley and little spot next to the garage. And I'm the same way, I got no driveway, I just got a spot between the garage and the house where it's parked.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm under the impression that gravel's okay. As a semi-improved.
Semi-improved.
And, you know, right, on a case-by-case basis.
and I mean, I think that it's pretty common for people in older parts of town to seek variances. They do, I mean, if you look at new properties, like, their properties are pretty similar, whereas the planning way back when was way different, and a lot of people have unique properties and a lot of unique situations, so, I think, like, requesting those variances are pretty common.
All right, well, anything more on this last page, let's just wrap up and then we'll get some more feedback and wrap up some of the outline issues. Anything more on this document that everyone aligned with that? Okay, so we have the one change,
I think we've had two.
captured maybe?
Yep.
Okay. I do have another question, that one came up on this, just, definition and.
It was my understanding that they could, if they put up a pad, even if it was next to their garage, that they could use gravel, crushed rock.
It hasn't, it doesn't, it's, right now, you can't use gravel. So I think we would have to change it if that's the route you wanna go, but I don't think that was ever allowed.
Why
From-
would it be bad to do that? If it's contained and it has dirt, why would it be bad to do that? Like, let someone use a gravel pad or something that's more affordable, that can be dug out easily if the next person comes along and doesn't want to throw all their stuff.
I mean, I've seen it both ways. I've seen some cities have gravel and like a certain kind of gravel, but there's standards. You have to have a certain thickness. You have to have edging around it to kind of control weeds and,
that, yeah.
so I think it's just kind of up to the council to determine if they want to set that standard. The current, I just think they weren't changing the current code, because the current code says limits it.
Yeah, I would think it's up to you. I mean, a gravel surface is acceptable for parking. I think some of this, and I wasn't privy to the planning commission discussions, but I would guess some of this was trying to establish some sort of an aesthetic element to what you're trying to do in not only what surface you're parking on, but then as you're going as far as if your car doesn't move, you can only have it here for so long before it gets towed away, or if you're trying to sell your car, those things are more aesthetic nuisance kind of things that you're trying to avoid and establish some standard that all the neighbors can agree to, kind of a thing, not necessarily whether or not gravel can support the weight of a car.
And the current code only speaks to driveways. And the current code, if you look back at it, it says that they shall be paved / hard surfaced with bituminous, concrete, or brick pavers. All of those essentially are what the code now defines as an improved surface. So now it would be amended to read that they shall be surfaced with an improved surface. So that's, that driveway standard has always been there. It's just clarifying now that there's a definition of improved surface in the code, and then that would, I guess, you'd have to speak to the planner to find out what the idea behind it is, because I didn't participate in the planning commission meetings, but it would be an idea of the continuity of the surface carrying onto the parking pad as well. For example, they don't allow a parking pad in the front yard, but they do allow you to connect your driveway to the side yard parking pad. So if you were to put an improved surface on the side of the garage, you can connect to it.
I want to say too, at one time the discussion regarding these additional parking pads on the side of the garage was when the topic first came up in the newer subdivision. It was even limited to the homes that only had 2-car garage. To recognizing, I'm not saying right, wrong, or otherwise, but recognizing that if you don't have a third car garage, you have some additional storage needs that can't be met inside your garage, and that was, at one time, that was a discussion as to whether or not it was even limited to those sorts of houses.
So what do we do with some of the homes in historic Merritt that have gravel driveways and
They can always apply for a variance.
Well, it was always explained to me that if improvements are made on the property, then
so if someone
it was,
sells their home, the new person's gotta pay it?
well, I think it goes along with any other improvement that they
I think you have to establish those, what is the threshold that would require those changes to be made? I mean, it's a valid point. If you're re-roofing your house, does that trigger the driveway ordinance?
Right.
And I would say that that's something you have to determine. Now, if they were gonna come in and pave, and not the situation, if you had a gravel driveway and you were coming in to pave it, does that require the pad next to the house to be paved at the same time or something? I don't know. I think the obvious thing is that, or I think based on your discussions, there's no intent to go and enforce your will on these properties that have existed in a current state for a long time, but it is a valid question as to what if anything would trigger those standards to be made, or to be met, excuse me.
We have gravel right
Is this changing that?
And, no, but we have some now, so.
Anything new, though, that wouldn't meet the criteria.
Or if you sell your house?
Playing devil's advocate, who would make someone then go in and say, go throw gravel and say, well, I did that 5 years ago. Someone can continue to do that, and we wouldn't know.
Either way, it says you still have to pull a permit, so, and that's always been the ordinance. So if they said, well, I did that 5 years ago, where's the permit?
Well, and honestly, I mean, we have ways to check that out.
There's neighbors, there's aerial photos.
Yeah, I can go on Google Street View and take a look at what it was
The rock
like.
guy at the quarry.
So I'm good with the document, kind of to balance from this conversation, that I think we then have to decide as council, how are we gonna handle these systems, and I think we have to, I think that's a separate conversation along with this, what are we gonna do? Correct, or is it?
Well, I think and again, your attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but, once you approve this, it's from this point forward, right? So you're not gonna go, tomorrow you're not gonna knock on somebody's door that doesn't meet this requirement because what they built yesterday doesn't meet it, which goes to the stuff in town here. But it is a valid question as well, what do you do now from this point forward if, one, is it your intent to try to get all these up to a certain standard over a period of time, and what are the triggers for that, or, what we really, we don't have an interest in that. If the neighbor calls and says, hey, this isn't right, this doesn't meet your code, what is the response to that, but.
And if the council would like, I can write up a memo about, the existing nonconformity, just educational, so you would understand how that process works under the law and under the code. And then different options that would be available, like you said, to try to
What
put it.
triggers the improvement? What triggers the?
It's so factually specific that, I don't wanna give like an advisory opinion about a situation, because it comes down to when did the conformity exist, what was the provision of the time that it came into conformity. If somebody built an illegal driveway prior to you doing this, it doesn't mean that they have a legal driveway now. It has to be an existing legal nonconformity. So if it is a legal use of property at the time that this ordinance, if passed and becomes effective, at that time, it's an existing nonconformity. It's sometimes called grandfather. That isn't like the most accurate term, and it's using a male. So it's an existing nonconformity. So that can continue as a use under certain circumstances, and it has to stop under certain circumstances, and those are, it can't be expanded, it has to continue to be used. If there's material alterations, there's a large body of case law that talks about when and how a existing nonconformity kind of loses those rights.
So the sale of a property doesn't necessarily trigger that you have to.
The use continues, as long as the use continues by the next owner, then that would be continuing.
And it all starts with the premise that at one time it was legal.
Yeah.
And what made it non-conforming was you changed your rules.
And residential properties, it's pretty easy what the use is gonna be. It's more complicated in a commercial or industrial, where the next person might not be using it for the same purposes. And then that's where the question is this a continued use?
Does that go for utilities as well? That would be non-conforming, or that there's a variance for?
Like something on private sewer, or, that would be a separate area of it. That's something that the city can, the city has options available to it to try to bring about conformity with the zoning code in time. If that's something that the city would like to pursue. There's nothing specifically, as was pointed out, written into this about what happens to existing nonconformities, so then it would just proceed under just the law and the legal presumptions for what happens with an existing legal nonconformity.
So we don't have to draw up anything separate if we adopt it, it's just there, it's already.
It's presumed in the passage of it that there are going to be, for example, if you say that all houses need to be painted white, the next day there isn't necessarily gonna be a fire sale on white paint, because they wouldn't have to go out and automatically comply with it.
Is that good enough for you, John?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I don't know.
Does that answer your question, Don? Is that what you had earlier?
Yeah.
You wanna talk about?
And just to be clear that we're not talking about any specific piece of property in town right now, or what may or may not happen with it. This is a general conversation.
Right. All right, any other comments on that list? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve ordinance 221, land use of 22, section 1, 3, section 1, 3, one change to section negative. Do you have a question on what we're changing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's one change to
It was front yard parking.
four B.
Oh, yeah, sorry, front yard 4B, and then we also had a spelling correction on
The typo change in 1D of the same.
E1.
Type of change. Correct. All right, that's the motion I'll be looking for. Have a motion, have a second, any further discussion? Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Go maybe to 6A, please.
Okay, Mayor and Council, in front of you is ordinance number 222, relating to establishing the salaries of mayor and council members, of the city of Mare. Just a little background, we've been reviewing, we've been doing a lot of reviewing of right now we're doing the administrative study on staff and, kind of the salaries of staff. The Personnel Committee has also been looking at the fire department and has also been looking at the council as a whole as well. We did do some comparisons to other cities, and it's been, upon our review, it's been over 10 years or so since the city of Mare has seen an increase, and so this ordinance today just our current ordinance doesn't really spell this out. It's more of a fee schedule every year. So this kind of adds language into our ordinance that specifies and helps us keep track of when we pass this. So the salary of the mayor would go from $2,600 to $3,000 per year, and then each council member would go from $2,000 to $2,400, which is pretty comparable to other cities around us. Per capita, and it also just kind of outlines that each council member shall get paid a stipend for every meeting as per their role as determined by the annual fee schedule, and it gives examples of which meetings are covered, and then expenses would be the standard mileage rate for meetings attended out of town. And this can't go in effect until next year after the election season, so councils can't increase their wages during their term, and so it's, upon passage, it wouldn't be until next year after the election has been completed.
Is the stipend gonna change?
Nope, it'll, right now it's 30, and so it'll stay at 30.
And that's set by our fee schedule?
Yep.
I'm wondering if we need to add one that just says something about having 2 meetings in one night. It's considered one meeting.
Okay.
So, like when we have work sessions, the same night as council meetings, those are 2 different meetings, but it really should only be one. It's not like we're gonna get a stipend for having like 2 meetings in one night.
Okay. Do you all agree on that? Yeah, I know what you mean.
Then you're gonna have to change the wording on, or just add an F.
Oh, I think we do.
During the work session.
Okay.
You looking at the fee schedule now?
On our
Time sheets.
time sheet, it actually says work session.
Yes, I think in the kind of.
Well, we may have work sessions without council.
Right, it says, yeah, right.
But it's a council and a work session, I
there's times too where we'll have two meetings in one night, a budget meeting and the regular council meeting, so that's kind of what we're doing. But, so, I just thought we should add it, two meetings in one night, this meeting.
But then you gotta be careful, because some might be able to two meetings in one day, and if you're doing a personnel committee meeting in the morning, then it's not one night. So, say something about.
I'm fine leaving it as is.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I don't, I think we've made a little more robust language. Clarify something. I'll look for motion to approve ordinance, 222, establishing salaries and the mayor and council. I'll second it. Any further discussion? And like Randy said, as personnel committee, as we're looking at all salaries from staff to fire department to, kind of keep that competitive, if you will, keep people interested. We want people to continue to run for election to help keep the city going, take away from their family, and other things that they can take away from it. I think that this is a little closer, a little more competitive. We surround the city with our communities. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That will take us to 6A4.
So this item was discussed briefly at the last city council workshop, just establishing or discussing and reviewing if summer hours would be appropriate. The personnel committee reviewed it a little bit further, just looking at what other cities in Carver County are doing. Some cities just keep regular yearly hours. There's a couple cities, Victoria and Watertown, that do summer hours. For example, Victoria does 7:30 to 4:30 Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 12 Friday. And then Public Works is generally like I've seen 6:30 to 3:30 or 6 to 3:30 Monday through Thursday, and then 6 to 10 on Friday. Where you can kind of see in the Watertown has that one. So we did discuss this at the personnel committee just to kind of get an idea of what other cities were doing. We did. It was recommended by the personnel committee to try the summer hours out. City Hall we were proposing would be 7 to 4:30 Monday through Thursday, and then 7 to 11. We were going to kind of, during this process, we were going to keep track of that 7 to 8 o'clock hour just to see if we were getting more of the people that commute into the metro, to see if that helped accommodate that group of people a little bit more. It would just go until Labor Day, so we would just see how it works out, but then it would transition back. And then Public Works agreed that they would be fine with the 6 to 3:30 Monday through Thursday and 6 to 10 on Friday. I know that with some transition, there may be some additional hours worked by our current Public Works staff, but they did say that would work for them as well.
What happens for on-call? That was my question. Like on Fridays after 10? Say with the on-call, the on-call person would just start earlier.
Exactly how we do.
Oh, I don't.
So who's ever on call Friday will be on call Friday. So that's usually how it.
So you pay by the day?
By the day, we get
doesn't
$10 a
matter
day
how
during
long.
the weekdays, and then the weekends we get $50 a day.
So now are you specifically asking after 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., who can say the on-call person to come in at 11 a.m.? Because there are other, we have a few other people we rotate on call?
Yes.
Is that what you're estimating, or?
Well, right, like, cause like, if it was, like, 3 o'clock on Fridays before,
Yep,
Yeah.
3:30.
so then that person would then be responsible, cause if we got an emergency call, you would, or whoever that worker is, would take care of it.
So-
Now, technically, the on-call person starts on-call earlier in the day on Friday.
Pretty much Friday night is when I transfer the phone, no matter what.
Even though you're off at 10, you're still gonna be on
I'll be
call
on call during the
Friday.
day.
So you have, okay.
And then I transfer the phone later on that day when everybody else is off work, like, we can operate.
Then they'll take that.
And then they'll,
Okay.
that's, yeah, that's all I have.
So would you get paid then the on-call from 10 to?
I'll get that $10 for that day. And then anything after that, it'll be.
I just want to make sure it's covered and that,
Oh, yeah,
if it's
it'll-
not you that's taking that Friday, like, let's just say you have Friday off, that on-call person now in the summer would just be starting on call earlier in the day.
Right, yep, and usually I'll have them all lined up there, and then I'll be gone.
Yeah, and then also in there, we did put up, like we do now, we would still have the appointments available upon request. So we do have people who have requested that we stay later, for documentation, and so we do accommodate that as well. So we would keep that, yep.
And then we're gonna monitor, and then if we get like a lot of complaints, I don't know why we would, cause we're kind of so small enough to be able to do this, but
Mhm.
if we do, then if they were gonna change that.
Yeah, we're planning on changing
Or
it
adjust
then.
your schedule so that at least someone's here, like, you know, stagger your start time so that someone's here
Mhm.
later.
Yeah.
Which is that, educate the public, so I can tell people.
Yeah.
Just so they know. In the beginning, we might get a few, and say, something happened, you know, they're,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look for motion to approve resolution for discussion of executive session. Motion and second.
When is this going into effect?
I think we were thinking, I mean, 'cause I didn't know if it would pass or not, but I was thinking probably next week or the week after. So we could educate people on, get it out this week that we were changing hours, or have a little bit of a gap to educate people that hours were changing.
Okay, so let's pick a time when it's due, when it's gonna start.
Um,
19th,
let's see,
or 18th.
did you say the 25th? 'Cause I'm gone for a conference. I'm flexible. Yeah. I think we can do either the 18th or the 25th. I think that would be enough time to kind of get that out there.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now let's go to. Yeah, they can.
So as you know, we did get a resignation letter from Brent in our Public Works Department. His last day will be June 15th, which is this Friday. I did schedule like a quick personnel committee meeting to discuss kind of the future of this position, and it does remain vital to the operation of the department and does need to be filled. We are also trying to fill a seasonal position at this time, so we're going to be short-staffed. Upon review, the position would be similar to the current position, except that the new position will report under the Public Works Worker 1. We did have a discussion too, just knowing from just talking to other cities too, right now is a really tough time to hire people. And so
This is a permanent position. Not
right.
temp.
Right, right. I think we've been getting a little bit that both temporary and seasonal, temporary and full-time have been kind of difficult. I think we've seen other cities that have been having trouble even finding permanent positions as well.
Unemployment's 3-point-some%, so the number of people looking for jobs in general is okay. Maybe my facts are wrong.
Much lower.
Is 1 month, is that too long to advertise?
It could be. It depends on how much we want to, how strong we want to get the application pool.
Maybe we'll get somebody,
Yeah.
you know? I
I mean,
I think this should have already been.
You can have it, I don't know, you can have it,
yeah, we
get
could,
the word out.
yeah.
You're good with a month, unless I try to get someone in here quicker, but.
Yeah, we could do we could try 2 weeks, see what happens, and if we don't have it, we can always extend it. So,
Mhm.
we can do 2 weeks and see what happens.
Because I would hate to get, let's say we have like 2 or 3 applicants in like next week, then we only have 1 more week, then we could actually close it, but if we don't get anyone, then otherwise if we keep it open for a month, then let's say we get 2 or 3 people up front, well, then we gotta do all the.
That's true.
Like we don't have.
I just want a qualified applicant, that's not the word. A qualified applicant,
Okay.
and someone willing to.
So being short-staffed for 2 months isn't gonna.
I'd rather get a really good guy and work a little harder.
Did you, is there anybody that's applied for the part-time one?
We've had one, they're a younger person in high school, so it'd, definitely be a seasonal position for them. But yeah, we've only gotten one so far.
I'm just concerned on what you're gonna do for 2 months.
I got some other things kind of in the works, too, that,
Yeah,
as
we've,
far as helping with homework and that kind of thing.
yeah, we've discussed kind of having some things outsourced, and then Kyle would also maybe have to do some overtime just to.
The motion to, post for, public works worker two position, based on the details presented.
I did see a typo. I do have 20 to 23 on one page and 20 to 24, so we have to talk about which one you want to do for that. I just have an error. I think we had discussed 20 to 23 in the personnel meeting.
I know 3 other cities that have been trying to find full-time workers, and their starting salaries are right around that 24 mark. And I know one city they had 5 applicants, and they had a 24 to 29 pay raise down there, 5 applicants. So I'm a little.
Maybe we'll get more of those.
Maybe.
Yeah, so we could start out with, we want somebody qualified, so,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
20 to 24 help.
Are we going to 2 weeks then, or do you wanna go 2 weeks?
We can try 2 weeks, and if we don't have anything, we can always extend it.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. City council report, president, report on.
Yeah, we had a meeting with the police manager. I was gonna talk about all that.
We've just been working on the community video. Yeah, so we've been staff and we do have some local residents that know how to do videography, is that the word? And that kind of, and some drone work, and so we were able to get them to do the project for us, and work with us, and so we're putting together the, kind of the template right now of what we want to see in that video, and
Will you be able to pull, once that's done, will you be able to pull some of those pictures for our website?
yeah,
We
they've
talked
been,
about that too.
yeah, they've been saying that they'll get some more pictures of seasonal pictures and stuff like that too, so.
And we have some good local pictures that were sent in.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
go
yeah.
up there too.
Right.
Well, just to add, we're gonna do like a certificate to
Oh, yeah.
create a copy and
We do have like plaques that we made,
Plaques.
so.
So we've been cutting certain,
Mhm.
Susan Parrish from Madison reached out, she wants to partner with the park board, she mentioned they're gonna have a bike day. So it's on our, agenda for the park board meeting tomorrow.
I just had the one person out there meeting, and just, there's some contact, the position, and, around some of our fire station. All right, any other business? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, and then, unless anyone has anything, that means during break, we'll jump right into the work session then. And call the work session to order. We're right in a tower lease.
Okay, so, Tim can help me with this one. So we recently, well, a few months ago, we received an email or correspondence from American Tower. They currently lease, the tower here at 413 Blue Jay Avenue. Their request simply was to extend, they would pay us a one-time lump sum to extend their lease 30 years.
30
30
additional years.
30
on top
additional
of the
years on
remaining
top of
term
their-
the lease.
Yeah. So we did, I had the attorney review it, we've been kind of back and forth with them on it, and, I think at this time, we just don't feel like what they're willing to offer is appropriate. I know Bolton and Mink helped kind of with their document that they were presenting as well, and we just felt that, what they're offering isn't really, worth it for the city to extend their lease. I know, Tim reached out to the company, the organization, and I guess at this time, I mean, we just explained that we weren't really interested in extending their lease at this time based on the information that they provided. So I guess we're kind of bringing it to the workshop today to open that discussion with you guys, give you the information, and kind of see where you'd like to us to proceed with it. Our opinion at this.
Are they offering a $20,000 lump sum and then continuing to pay them monthly?
Yes, absolutely.
Or their end, okay.
So it's essentially a signing bonus to extend the lease for another 5 6-year terms or 6 5-year terms. So the way these leases work is they are in 5-year terms, and then they put on a whole bunch of those. And during that term, the tenant, which is the tower, which is Verizon, has the right to keep on adding on those additional terms. They could decide to leave at the end of one of those terms. If they did that, they'd have to restore the property back to, take the tower down. They're not gonna do that. The tower's gonna be there for a long time. It's a pretty lucrative tower for them. The issue that we're having, or what I don't see being the benefit at this point, is that there's a lot of time left on the current lease. So I can see why they're in a hurry to extend it. I mean, I can see why it's in their benefit to log it in. They say, it makes the tower more marketable, because they sublease it. So they have Verizon's got their equipment up there, but then they let other companies put their equipment up there as well. And then the city gets 25% of whatever rent that they get on that. So, on the one hand, the more attractive it is to subtenants, the more sub-rent the city's gonna bring in. But with so much time left, I think that if they're really interested in it, their offer's only gonna go up. And, I mean, we have more than 10 years before the current lease expires. It's 16 years. So we have 16 years before the current lease ends, and then they want to add another 30 on top of it. So if you think about the $20,000 that they're offering you to sign to guarantee that that tower could be there until 2064, okay? So that tower is going to be behind where current City Hall is until 2064. To lock that down, they're only offering you $20,000 now. And if you divide that out over the years that they're asking for, it's pretty small. I mean, it's $55 a month that they're going to pay you to do that. And I mean, it's if that's what it's going to take to sign the lease for them to stick around, if they want us to do it. I mean, this is what they've come to us, and I just don't see that as enough of an incentive to do it at this point in time.
I would agree. I don't think $20,000 is enough to landlock that for that many more years. I think this is certainly what it may be, assuming this building may not be here, City Hall may move somewhere big. I just don't think we can do that. I'll look at it another 6-7 years as we get, but I don't think we can rush. I think the landlock that for that long.
So the terms of the lease, as far as the other skin and bones of the lease, are pretty competitive. So I mean, it is a good lease market-wise. I've talked to some people that, you know, my advice from somebody who does market analysis was, don't pay me to do a market analysis because you guys have a pretty good lease. So he, you know, looking at it, he said, and so the odds of us getting at this point in time substantially better terms on the lease aren't good. But the question is what incentive do we have to bind the city to those terms for so long? And 20 is not a substantial offer.
Yeah, I don't think we should do anything right now. And the $35,000 we're getting these many years is nice. It's a nice chunk of change, but it's not that much to landlock it for that long.
And that number will go up, you know, so there is an automatic increase on the yearly rent, and I presume that they have an automatic increase with their sub-tenants rent as well, so you'll continue to collect the 25% of what they take. So that will continue to go up, you know, in over the years. So I guess what I would suggest is if they reach out to us, we could tell them that we're not interested in their offer, and then we would just, you know, then we just wait and see what they do. You know, obviously we're not gonna, we'll listen to an offer that they would make, right? But as far as what is currently on the table, I don't see a hurry.
I'm sure this office will have more.
Yeah, this company is gonna have some incentive to get this.
Spend 10 years on more loan than what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
So, I think we should just accept their offer at this point in time.
Appreciate your feedback on it.
It's fascinating stuff, really. That's very valuable real estate.
Yeah.
It is. Churches are making tons of money by putting them on steeples, and yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Anything else for that?
Okay. So, I just got this was, since hiring and stuff like that goes is ultimately up to the city council. I know we've had an interest in a volunteer at City Hall, and so I just wanted to bring that discussion up at this time. And I guess the only question is, I guess the conversation would be, you know, are you comfortable with a volunteer coming in to work at City Hall? It's also, I mean, just, I don't know.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Tice had asked to volunteer. I was like,
I
offered to volunteer. So,
Do what?
yeah. So it was just kind of, yeah. So we were just opening up that discussion because.
You can learn how to drive a lawnmower. I'm all alone.
Yeah.
I don't have enough days off to keep up like the weed ordinance would kind of, probably kind of, right on me and my job. But, yeah, I have some afternoons free, I have like one day off a week, and I guess when I offered, I thought, oh, you know, I could do the filing, I could do the electronic, whatever. I
Mhm.
could just do whatever.
Yeah, and I know one thing is we haven't done the Laserfiche, we haven't finalized the Laserfiche part yet. I know when we do get there, we will probably need extra help with that, kind of getting everything digitalized. That'll be something in the near future, hopefully by the fall. Yeah, so right now, I guess we just wanted to open that up for discussion. Right now, I know we did have a temporary position in recently that we did get rid of. We're kind of don't have, I mean, we've been evaluating it too, like, we don't have a whole lot of work right now between the two, I mean, like, extra work. I mean, some weeks are busier than others. I guess, what would we do with this position? Like, would we create some, like, work?
I talked to Maggie a little bit about this, and the first, initial thought was, well, great, so I'll say great. The more we talk about it, the more information Maggie's got, I tend to think kind of where Maggie's going. I think it puts staff in a bad position with council specifically doing it. If there's an error that gets made, you know, the administrator is supposed to discipline a council member, but could put herself at risk, you know. I just think it puts in a bad position of
I
some of
don't
that
think you
stuff.
would give your volunteer any kind of a responsibility that you do.
Well,
It's a volunteer position.
Things get filed wrong, or things get done,
Yeah.
things can get done wrong, and then.
Yes, that's
So I just think it puts everyone in a bad situation when I talk about it. I would recommend, I think, that.
From a legal perspective, I can see some issues without, particularly like if you don't have a job description or a position description that's been created. It's what is the volunteer doing? There's work comp issues if there's an injury in the workplace. There's equal access. There's non-discrimination. So normally you'd say we have this open position and people can apply for it, and then everybody is going to be looked at equally. You have data practices issues where the city council staff are dealing with private data of various degrees of privacy throughout the day, and typically the only time an individual, and you see this from the job description, that even Maggie's job description is very clear that you're only allowed to see the private data that you need to do your job. So that could be, I know that other cities, this is the reality of the current world, is that a lot of cities are making their budget go further by using volunteers. Those are situations where they have work that needs to be done. They're larger cities, or for example, I think the city of, who did I talk to? Plymouth. That's another liability issue there's liability issues, and the more dangerous the job, the higher risk that it would be. Then there's the other question: if you have a bunch of work, then there might be the perception that why aren't you paying somebody to do it, as opposed to doing it. But I will say, like, the city of Plymouth, for example, has 2,400 volunteers a year, and they do all kinds of different tasks between, parks and rec type stuff, which is clean up, reserve officers, all the way down to clerical and scanning and things like that. But they have very specific job descriptions for their volunteers. They have in every single volunteer is interviewed. A lot of them are background checked if they're working with, students. So, I mean, it isn't it's one of those no good deed goes unpunished. The lawyer always has to come in and tell you all the terrible things that could happen in a situation that seems like it should not be fraught with peril. So, I mean,
Yeah, as far as having a council member do it, it was just a gesture on my part. So are you saying, city council aside, we shouldn't probably have volunteers come in at all, even from the public, even from the outside?
I mean, if you guys wanna do volunteers, you just have to look at all of those legal issues or liability issues that could arise.
But
You
it
wanna
should
have,
not be a council member either way.
I mean, it depends on what the volunteer's doing, is what I'm trying to say. So if it's in the office setting, the problem is the clear chain of command. So you have somebody's gotta give you directions on how, when I say you, I'm talking about the volunteer. I know that, I don't wanna make this uncomfortable. So if they're given the volunteer directions and, instructions on how to do work, and then if that person was that individual's boss in another, imagine if it was your mom, or my mother or my grandmother that's coming in and volunteering, and I have to give them, I've been used to her telling me what to do my entire life, and now the roles have switched, it would be uncomfortable. And it could switch the dynamic in the office. And in particular, I mean, the city administrator, the city code says that, no member of the council or mayor will interfere with or prevent the city administrator from exercising their own good faith and judgment in the administration of the city. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, I'm saying that there's a potential or the appearance of it where it's, I don't think you did that right. A scanning example, if you're saying, I don't want you to scan it this way, or whatever happens, it's hard to, you don't fire somebody from a volunteer job. But, getting fired from volunteering almost feels worse than getting fired from a job. So that's just my concern, is for the working relationship and the chain of command. That would be, and I certainly would say that there's places for anyone to volunteer if there was the work to do, whether it's helping out around. I mean, you guys are looking at, you need the cleaning service contract updated. Everybody's kind of chipping in on that.
Right.
But the question is, what are they doing? What is the volunteer expected to do? What type of data would they be looking at? So we need to try to cordon off what they have access to, or possibly have a non-disclosure agreement, something drafted up. There's just a whole lot more when you start peeling back the outer surface than, even churches now have to look hard at what their volunteers do, and they never used a background check for anything, and now it's very detailed because the lawyers got involved, so.
So if we want to have volunteers, we should probably be putting something in place, some sort of a description, and get the data practices signed, and the waivers signed, and blah, 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 the agreements, whatever.
There's a creative way of looking at it. Doing different things. I don't think it's necessarily like out of the question, but not just let's have some volunteers help it. Or like, it would be like hiring, but there's no compensation. You're treating them like
But
job description.
absolutely.
all
And there's
those factors.
set expectations, you can set it for a term or a period of time. The flip side of that, though, is a volunteer, usually it's, this many hours per week or whatever it is. And if it's on their time and their convenience, that might not be what the city needs for the scanning, for example. When you do get into digitizing everything, that might be something that a temp position would make more sense, where you have somebody with set hours that can come in and do that task. I think the first thing would be finding out what work is needed for a volunteer to do.
I think maybe some of that volunteer comes more to building a playground set, doing those sorts of things, doing that work. But I get the side where someone might want to volunteer, because hone your skills on certain things, or do other things, or learn other things that maybe you want to do, volunteer at home, maybe you do want to be a home maintenance worker or something, it could be, if I see that, but, that almost means more of a,
An intern?
The internship.
So I think at this point, I don't know if we need to do anything, I would recommend do anything for this specific instance right now. Maybe we need to start getting stuff together for volunteer positions.
Yeah, I guess the thing I was thinking of is,
We
yeah.
need to get back to workers, some needs,
Anything else on volunteer? So engineering update, they said, Friday,
Yeah, we had a Public Works, Committee meeting here, several weeks ago now, and, talked about a few different things. One of them was pond maintenance. So you have, do you have any idea how many ponds we have, Kyle?
I haven't even.
So several stormwater ponds throughout town. Some of them are getting, where they're probably approaching 20 years of age. So the question gets to be is, you have these out there, it's part of your infrastructure system. What are we doing, or what should we be doing to maintain them? Over time, the purposes of them is they're taking, stormwater off the streets in various locations, dropping sediment and nutrients out, before it goes downstream. So with that, over time, you start collecting sediment and pollutants and all kinds of things that you collect in those ponds. One of the issues that we have, especially with the earlier additions that happen in Mare, is we have them in easements, they're in backyards, they're in some places that aren't real easy to get at in some cases. And so, we've got kind of multiple questions here. One is if and when we should start maintaining these things, and then two is if we are going to do that, how are we going to do it? How do you get at them? Over time, we have, even if we have easements, which we do to get at these places, we have fences in the way, we have sheds in the way, we have trees that have their playground equipment, whatever it is, landscaping. So we just started talking about the long-term need to maintain these things and kind of the dilemma of, we think it's going to be a difficult task when we take that on. So one of the things was that we discussed was, is there a need to at least start assessing, if nothing else, just kind of a visual assessment of the condition of these ponds, an assessment of what are our access capabilities right now as they exist. So if we wanted to get at them, how would we get at them? And really just start formulating a plan as to what are we going to do here? How many of them do we have? If we started cleaning them and we said over the next 10, 15, 20 years we wanted to clean these things out, how much is it going to cost? How would we go about that? What order would you do them in? Do we start with the easiest ones first because we can get at them, or do we take it by age, or is it really more of a true assessment condition and we're going after problems that we know exist? If you look at those areas, a lot of them have kind of voluntary trees that are growing along the edges, or some erosion, or, and then in some cases you have homeowners that have improved the shoreline of these ponds, doing various things. So part of it is just kind of I think we have a sense of what some of the issues are going to be. We have a sense of what the condition of these ponds are, but we really haven't looked at it in a whole lot of detail.
Certainly, we need a plan in place and get going on this, and I would certainly recommend the staff, of course, and yourself to start for all those things you mentioned. Do we clean them? Do we go and get trash out of them? Do we not? Do we do anything when they get algae in them? Are we going to clean them out? Can we get to them? Should people even be adding stuff around them or not? When trees do grow, should we be out there cutting them down right away? I mean, for almost everything you mentioned, I think we absolutely should be getting a plan together, getting more and more discussion on these ponds and what to do with them, and and obviously we need a function. They're there for a purpose, and we need a function. Is our main concern. More so than the aesthetic aspect of it, but I absolutely think we should get something done.
When we do it, we want to make sure that it absolutely needs to be done.
Right.
And not, a little bit here and there. And this is a big expense going in between these things out. So just making sure it's done. Another issue kind of we have is, especially in the, new subdivisions for the first phases, the lots actually go all the way in and off. So, like the trees on the shoreline and everything else that's grown up over time, the neighbors probably love them, everything, they hide everything. Well, we go in, we restore it, probably cut them down, banks and everything, make it how it was originally, so.
Someone's going forward too, what do we do with other things now?
Exactly.
Put in new ponds, let's make sure we have a good clear path in there, that that's how we're accessing the document, as our access. Not that we're not doing that, but really get it down, how we're, really addressing it.
Yeah, and, and along with this is there more of a dedicated effort to try to educate people that live along these ponds as to what they're for and things they should or shouldn't do. My guess is we have a lot of them where you start getting yard waste and compost that, kind of puts along the edge of those that can cause some problems. Certainly the newer subdivisions, we're a step ahead of where we were from the standpoint of now we put them in a dedicated outlot, so the city owns the property around the pond. It's on somebody else's property, and we have an easement. We have outlots that provide us access to them, again, to try to protect those corridors in a little bit more of a permanent manner than what we originally started with. If and when we get to where we're going to start dredging these things out, then we have issues where we've got to test the material that's coming out of there. There's potentially a lot of bad stuff in there that you can't necessarily just take it and dump it somewhere. You got to deal with it appropriately. So if nothing else, there's a lot of questions to be answered if we're going to get into this. Right now, nobody's requiring you to do this. I would suggest that it's part of city infrastructure. You take care of your streets and your other city infrastructure and have maintenance programs that you do with it, that this should be no different. But the reality is nobody's telling you that you have to do it now. I don't think that it's probably more of a matter of time before this becomes more of an issue where maybe somebody, an agency or something happens that kind of forces the issue. So now if you look at the number of ponds you have, this is something that kind of can be planned out, budgeted for, spread out over a significant enough amount of time that allows you to kind of take care of it without any significant impacts to your budget.
I assume a lot of other cities have something similar. We're not recreating the wheel, are we?
No, I don't think so. Cities are having the same discussions and the same dilemma. I would say the more sophisticated cities are probably more on top of this than smaller cities with more limited budgets. It's the interesting thing, and one of the things you approved earlier this spring, again, was your water CIP or looking at the pavements. The pavements are a good example too of, you have this growth and we're building all these new developments. All of that has been built and it's city infrastructure now. Well, for a long time you didn't have to worry about it because it was brand new. Well, when you start looking at Coldwater or the beginning phases of Hidden Creek, that stuff's starting to get 20 years old now. That new stuff isn't new anymore. So I think we've got to start planning for some of those maintenance needs that are, if it's almost 20 years now, if we wait 10 years, it's going to be 30 years old. And then plus the stuff that's 10 years old now is going to be 20 years old. So we have to have some kind of a logical approach to taking care of it so that it's not hitting you all at once, or that would be the goal anyway.
Yes, I think that's great. I think we need to do something, otherwise it's just going to start getting, we're not going to do the job. But there's been a couple things going wrong in different Facebook sites. So when it comes to stuff in the pond, can they just call you and you go out there and get it? Because I've been hearing that just call the city and Public Works will go out there and get it.
I fished at Far Farther once with a long stick.
I think that's some of the things we do because we do them, and Kyle was, and he,
If I can get it, I'll get it, but I tell them flat, I don't have a boat, I don't have this. I mean, I didn't put the garbage there, the city didn't put the garbage
do it,
so.
I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that's exactly some of that stuff. Because I found some of that same stuff, people go out and maybe if garbage blows into my yard, I go pick it up, and so should they be doing it, or should we do it? Because we don't want it in the water, or, so, we don't have anything to extract even now, so.
But we own unless the landowner doesn't want it.
We have,
In my development, every homeowner around that pond owns a portion of the pond.
all the way down
Half
to
of
the
my
water.
backyard is.
And the city has an easement for maintenance purposes.
Right.
Like I say, the newer additions, we own them.
And it started some of those basic ones, get a handle on them, how bad it's all. Then what are we gonna do? Are we just, some of the basics, we just leave them algae also? And educate, on the lawn clippings and the fertilizer, and that's why they're getting that way.
We put something out on Facebook, and then our new newsletter going out this week also has some information about ponds and.
I would love to see it, staff and public works, it takes some time, it should hopefully it's gonna happen, so.
Yeah, and so, with that in mind, I think there's issues that come up that Public Works has to deal with, because somebody called and, there's a real problem here, and they go and take care of it. There's other things to this, is more long-term thinking, that we have a chance to kind of chip away with this. My first questions, or the first bits of information, I think, are, what do you have, and how would, and what is the current, like I say, more of a visual. If we had to access this pond, what's in our way? Just start even getting a handle on that. And then, at some point, some sort of, like I say, more of a visual inspection of just the general condition of them, and then probably maybe, some sort of a sample policy for you to at least start thinking through what do we want to do with these? What, like Kyle said, if we're gonna deal with this, are we gonna go in and we're gonna dredge this thing out to its original contours, and whatever's in the way is gonna come out, and we're gonna reestablish it, and that's the policy? Or is it, let's fish around the inlet and take out whatever's settled there, and we'll leave the rest of it? Right now, nobody's taking a sample of what's coming out the outlet and determining whether or not it's good or bad. Someday that might be the case.
Maybe we'll start working with Kyle and basics done.
Maybe I can work with Tice, and we can get her a set of hip waders.
All right, I'm on 5 Dave.
Yeah, and so, Maggie and I talked earlier today, so we'll kind of expand this a little bit beyond this issue, but if you recall, or maybe you don't remember, but in our development agreements, and I think city code, it talks about having a certain amount of topsoil on these new lots. It creates some logistical issues as to how do we ensure that happens. So when you think about kind of the development process, so we're developing areas that were once fields, right, farm fields. So we started with some reasonable amount of organic material that was growing crops, and now we've developed it. And what happens is the developer comes in and they've got their mass grading plan, so they start moving dirt. Well, one of the things that's required of that, you strip the topsoil, pile that over here, we move the dirt and we put it back. Okay, so now the developer's done with their phase. Theoretically, that topsoil's been put back, but it's been moved around and rooted up a little bit. So what, if anything, have we lost in that process? I guess it's tough to say. Now, that developer turns the individual lots over to the home builders. They come in, theoretically, they strip that topsoil off, pile it up over here, build their house, and then when they're done, they put it back. Well, in the process of all of that, by the time we're done, that topsoil didn't necessarily disappear, but it isn't in the pristine condition that it once was when it was growing corn. And so we've got these kind of this dilemma of we're telling the developer, you need 6 inches of topsoil out there. We're telling the builder, hey, before you put sod on, we want 6 inches of topsoil on these lots. Pushback is, well, the developer says, that topsoil is there when I gave it to the home builder. And the home builder says, we're just working with what we got. And then somebody would come along and they'd also say, we've tested this stuff. There's enough organic material in here. It grows grass just fine. Now, the city's original interest in all of this was really a water conservation question. That the more topsoil, the better those lawns, the better condition of those lawns and the ability to kind of absorb and hold water, the less water people are in need to use to have nice green lawns. Long story short, kind of not exactly sure what to do with this or how to enforce it. The easy thing would be to do is go out there and say, it doesn't look like black dirt, haul in 10 truckloads, and when it looks black, we'll tell you, and we stick a tape measure in it and say that at 6 inches, we'll let you put your sod on.
Is there a way that we can word it that after the home is built and the landscape commission, that 6 inches of topsoil must be put on and maybe before sodding? But I know when I take my walks and I walk through Southeast Pittsfield and I'm checking out the topsoil line, I'm lifting it up and I'm like, that's right.
Yep.
There's 0 topsoil in there. And now this year, and I go a lot with that last year about the home in back of our neighborhood last year, they never put topsoil down. I'm there out there running or walking every day. I'm seeing what they're doing. I'm lifting up the sod, there's nothing under there, and then I'm looking up the grass and it's not there.
So, I think the issue would be that, basically we would, well, 2 things. One is, going forward, I think then you basically just tell everybody, when you build this home, you have to import topsoil. We're not going to accept the material that's on site because in the past it's proven not to be acceptable. In the meantime, how do we enforce that? And if it's as simple as just telling them it's not good enough for us, and when they call and yell at us and tell us we had it tested and there's plenty of organic material, we just say, no, we went and looked at it, it's not black, and we're not going to accept it, and hang up the phone and tell them, call me back when you've hauled out black dirt. Because essentially where we're at is every house that gets built would have to import topsoil. It doesn't exist out there. So part of the discussion tonight is we're looking for direction. Is that what you're expecting the homeowners to do? And if that's the case, then we have our direction, and we'll just put our foot down and tell them we expect you to import material. We don't care what's on site. We looked at it, and it's not acceptable topsoil, and no doubt. And so that's been the issue right now is they call and say, hey, there's not topsoil out here, and my response has been call your home builder and tell them you're not happy with the product they gave you. And here's the problem too is somehow if nobody has accounted for the cost of hauling topsoil out to those sites. And I'm not saying that's our problem, but the reality of it is if that's what we're going to require, I guarantee you that nobody's building a house right now and expected to have to haul topsoil to that site. So who's paying for that? We know we're not paying for it, so more than likely then it's going to be between the home builder and the developer duking it out to decide whether or not the developer didn't give the homeowner what they were supposed to have, or vice versa. On the what?
On the home, instead of giving out to the buyers, I want to know what the specs are when it comes to like landscaping and grass. I have no idea what the specs are.
I have no idea either.
Well, I know in the development agreement.
Sorry, not to interrupt, 3 years ago when I was looking to build a house versus buying one that the builder didn't even provide sod. But that was additional on top of the price of the house.
I know our development agreement says
So they would have the
sod.
city requires sod, regardless of what your agreement was with the home builder, but yeah. But it's only the front yard too, remember, or it's only 20 feet behind the house or something. We've run into that before too, now where you got kind of the back part of the lot is kind of this weedy mess. Well, and that's the problem is, I think the other reality of it is, we deal with a lot of first-time home builders here in town, and one, they're excited, they're building their dream house or their first house or whatever it is. A lot of them don't, the last thing on their mind is to understand what, if anything, they should be asking for. Or you're just assuming that, well, why wouldn't you do that? Yeah. Yep. And again, so that, part of this is, again, the city's original interest in this was water conservation. At some point, how much of us do we want to insert ourselves in, or is this, if that guy built you a house and you're not happy with the product he gave you, do we want to get in the middle of that, or do we just tell him, call your builder and tell him you're not happy?
Eventually it falls back on the homeowner, right? Because when their grass dies, they have to replace it.
And again,
They're gonna pay for it anyway.
we just need some direction. If we're going to take a hard line on this, then I just want to know that.
Well, the houses that are going up now, they build them quick, they saw them, and then they're not even sold sometimes. So it's not really unless someone's there specifically building a home and mirror, they know they're thinking it all through and everything. But in my mind, the easiest way for us to enforce it would probably be tied into the landscape estimate. Right, but we don't go out before they install it, we go and check, they got sod, they got trees and everything, but we only got to schedule a time, okay, we got the black dirt down, call the city, schedule a time.
Well, and if we're going to get serious about it, we basically have to have a specification that says what is black dirt.
Right.
Because, again, if it's just a certain percent of organic material, well, that
I found out to find root stops, I found fence posts, they just cover everything.
Yeah. And again, I think we are trying to get a little better at that, with over the years because of some of the problems we've found. But the last time this came up, which was it last summer or even the summer before, our attempt to tell them this isn't good enough haul-out material was met with a we will not do it. That is organic material and it grows grass just fine. Look at the rest of our developments, so we don't have a problem. We're not going to do it.
There's no that argument, we can look at all the homes that have been put sod in, they're all on there, fine. But for the water conservation, it's not, I don't know.
Yeah, we do get people who don't understand the water conservation, and then we get people who have ridiculously high water bills because they're trying to keep their grass green, and we do have one person that's upset because they feel like the clay underneath is causing him to water their yard more, and
Depends on how they want it, if they water in short amounts, if you have a house with clay, you water for an hour, it's just gonna run right off. There's certain steps they have to do.
And that's what I found behind their house, you can have 1 inch rain like this, will go up 4 inches, because we're all sitting on clay, we're nothing but clay. We have 0 top clay.
So, I mean, if the position is, we want everybody to haul, we're not going to accept the in-place material anymore because it's been proven that it hasn't, it's not working for us. And the expectation is everybody's going to have to import topsoil. Then I think we have to communicate that with the home builders in town and just put them on notice that, just so you know, don't even call us until you haul in black dirt.
I think that as soon as you come in there, I think you're gonna get builders, and I know I'm building here, because they're gonna be requiring that, I just think, because you're gonna be raising the cost of the homes, that you're gonna get people who don't want to live in here, because it's gonna have to increase their home.
I agree with that, I do, I think that neighbors next door,
Right.
the grass is growing fine.
Well, and, you know, so I guess, and keep in mind too, kind of that process I described to you too, is through that, there's some handing over of who's watching this. You know, when Bolton and Mink has been charged with kind of looking at the overall development as, you know, the mass grading, some of that, we probably have, you know, again, a little better chance to get some of that black dirt there. But, you know, if you look at Coldwater 7th or Hidden Creek 6th and 7th, that was done before we were even engineers, the grading part, right? So, you know, to even know what was there or not there, I mean, that was so long ago, we don't even know. But then once, you know, it's home building time now, it's handed over to your building inspector, and I have no idea of kind of what how much they even look at, you know, did you strip the black dirt? Are you properly protecting it and keep it from getting contaminated, moving in? I don't know if that happens or not.
So if it's a current requirement and we're letting people kind of get by with not doing it and have a conservation issue and then the homeowner ends up paying more money because they gotta replace it goes back to whoever inspected that, right? Whoever came in and said, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it goes back to again, what's topsoil or not. If
Right.
they got it in topsoil.
Right.
The builder, I
That's
think,
it, it has the right.
is claiming that they have that. They're claiming that they do. And so, what we did with this previous sheet was, is we did talk to the builder directly, and the builder did say that they would send their landscape person over there, but it's like,
Yeah.
it is under warranty.
And we don't have any control over the builders, correct, on what they, if someone's coming in and they're building a home system, we don't have any control over the things the builder says or asks them, correct? But that's between now and the.
Yeah, I mean,
Where I'm going is, Nate, why doesn't the builder just, hey, here's our base price, you get the topsoil that's right there, an extra $500, we'll put in 2 inches, an extra, you know, but we can't control that, I mean,
the spot we're in right now is we've got language and ordinance and our development agreements that says this is what we require. And, yeah, and that, so then, yeah, it's what is topsoil, or, you know, is this okay, is it not? The other issue is.
In the city, I think that's more so, to me, that's between the inspector, the homeowner, and home builder. You know, if the home inspector and the home builder and the homeowner all disagree on what our ordinance says, that's still a court matter. I don't think we should be involved in that law.
You probably just have one. Yeah, a lot of them, right?
Yeah, we kind of get pulled back into it at the end when we go out and review the grading before they sod it, and then we're kind of looking at going, boy, this doesn't look real black, but now what do we do? You know, and then the other part of it though too is with that clay, just in the building process, even if you got that, whatever topsoil you got it stripped and sitting over here, that clay is so beat down and compacted, it's like concrete. So even by the time they pull back whatever organic material they have, you're putting it on cement at that point.
I don't think that would support that. So having them all. That's what hurts the most.
Like between the homeowner and the home builder. My father-in-law recently, sold a home and he had to use it for rotting for that, but he also knows what he's talking about. But yeah, I don't think that's for us. If our inspector, and our responsibility is gonna fall back on the city, because the homeowner's gonna get mad and say, oh, this needs to get patched, it's all clay, and that's what it's all on the inspector then.
So, what I would say then is, yeah, we'd probably, well, a couple things probably would just be a good meeting to have too this time of year is, the other thing we kind of struggle with is, erosion control, street sweeping, those sorts of things where again, it kind of, at some point, you know, we're up here looking at the development of a whole, and then you have these individual lots that the building inspector is kind of monitoring, trying to coordinate that as, okay, do you want us kind of driving through once a week and just looking at erosion control and raising our hands if something doesn't look right, or is that something the building inspector should be doing for you? And I don't know. All right, well, so long story short, then it sounds like we'll continue to do our best to make sure we got as much organic material as available on that site, and then if well, yeah, I mean, about the best the inspector could do is, if it's getting contaminated during the home building process, then, you know, theoretically, whatever's there should be stripped, piled somewhere, and protected until you're all done. If that's not happening, you know, there maybe is an opportunity to do a better job with that, if somebody's watching it. Kind of within the four corners of the building and anything beyond that. Yep.
All the house, the landscaping, dirt, slope, grading.
And we're not out there when a building permit gets pulled, so.
So there's, requirement for system topsoil, something happens with it not, they come to the city, we can go confirm that there was not, and then, can we take it case by case, or do we?
Meets the definition.
Right, right now out there is topsoil, as part of the development.
Yeah, it should be. And again, you know, we're dealing with developments right now that have been sitting there for 15 years.
Correct.
So,
Right.
you know, the mass grading was done, and topsoil was put back on, they planted whatever they're planting, so now we're going back into those areas, and just putting the utilities in, but the grading's already done. We bring it up just from the standpoint of we're getting the questions from homeowners saying, hey, you're not enforcing your ordinance, or boy, this is no good, what should we do? And we don't have necessarily a real good answer for them, other than, again, I guess my preference would be is, if you're not happy with the product you got, then you should take it up with the guy that sold it to you. And that doesn't relieve us from the responsibility to do the best we can to you know. Yep.
I think in our water supply plan, we put in there, that's what was required.
Yep. Just the logistics of following through on that has been a little bit more challenging than you might think. So, I don't know that we need to solve anything tonight. We'll keep kind of answering the questions the way we have, but if, now that you kind of know it's an issue, give it some thought, I guess, and let us know if you got some revelations of how you want to either us to handle the existing situation, or maybe do things different going forward. Then before we move on from my stuff, I just wanted residential development related again. We talked about the ponds. We continue to get all kinds of calls, especially because it's been pretty wet actually the last several years. Backyard drainage issues where, again, we'll go back to where we start this. You got the mass grading. Places that were supposed to have water running were graded theoretically appropriately with appropriate slopes, and then we have the building process where from that mass grading plan to now developing individual lots, in many cases we kind of lose the overall drainage plan, or the execution of the drainage plan gets messed up with the way the individual lots are finished off. So we end up with all of these calls of, I got a backyard, it's squishy, it's breeding mosquitoes, whatever it is. We go out and look at them, and And to this point, our stance on those things has been, yep, you're right, I mean, you have an issue, this is what you might be able to do to address it. In many cases, it's getting together with your neighbors and trying to reestablish this overall drainage through the backyards. Just wanna let you know, those issues keep coming up, and that's kind of the way we continue to approach it. You know, we had, was it Hidden, well, what's the road in Hidden Creek, you know, we had where, again, the backyards were flat and there was storm sewer back there, but, you know, we looked at, make sure the infrastructure was working right, or if it needed maintenance, we'd address that, otherwise we kinda turned it over to the property owners and told them what we thought they could do. I think Councilmember Boder's neighborhood, we had a similar issue, and again, we turned it over to the neighbors to try to deal with it. So again, just wanna let you know that issue keeps coming up, and that's the response we've been given. So if you have different thoughts on that, just let us know. Maggie, was there anything else you had? Okay.
So this was just, I was just bringing this up, you guys, for additional information. I know we had talked about the location, and a little bit more details on the parking lot pool, this new reason. I know it's like not too bad right now, because you guys know, right, but, just wanted to bring you back some, like, the location, the photo metrics of where it would be located and how it would kind of impact the site. It would be, I think we have a light already on the building, so.
We determined last time that it wasn't working for something, wasn't it? It's not.
It's really dark a little bit.
There's still a light there, isn't
Light's
there?
working.
Oh, yeah, the suggestion was get the same time that the fire department has, because that lights up, like, a lot.
We get a second
They are
quote.
right.
Do we have to reach out to about point forward?
No,
I thought we thought it was high.
yeah, 'cause it would be kind of digging to the, and connecting to the electronic, facility, public works facility. So I can give another, well, I just,
It's on the edge,
On the edge?
yeah. No, not so far.
That one's right in the grass, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one that you're
This
showing.
is one.
I thought you were talking about putting pole in the middle of the segment.
Oh, no.
I just wanted to,
That's one
So where is it? Like behind this tree where the first divot is? On the
Black
third?
dot is right there.
That black dot.
Is this in front of the tree?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we always said, like, get pretty close. Yeah. I always like getting pretty close on things, because it just gives you a good.
Pretty, you can keep this in mind, one of our downtown streetlights is probably about, what, $5,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty typical, you know, I mean, the electric,
I didn't think this was that expensive, but I don't really even know what's gonna be like,
You haven't had a replacement.
well, yeah, but I think we should get another quote, I don't think we should ever go with just one quote, I think we
Well,
should
get
get.
another one.
Roy Electric has done work for that, you know, that kind of work before, and, yeah.
Get another one.
I got a call.
It is separate.
Anything else?
Kyle, our side streets, what's the plan? Like they're all potholed and,
It's on the list, so.
so you need to.
Yeah, I just gotta go through a document and then call me.